Members wishing to speak to Bill 16, Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act. Member from Calgary, Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be able to speak in committee today in regards to Bill 16, the Red Tape Reduction Amendments Act. As my colleague just rightly pointed out, there are 17 sections of this act, touching on everything from surface rights to libraries, Commercial Tenancies Protection Act, and indeed the Mental Health Services Protection Act. And it's that particular section that I'd like to speak to today. Since having the honor of being elected almost 1 year ago, Mr. Chair, I have had the opportunity to work with a really wonderful group of stakeholders on this particular file. The leadership of the Association of Counselling Therapy of Alberta has just been amazing to work with. They have been such an incredibly hardworking and diligent group of stakeholders, and working for years, 5 years and more, Mr. Chair, on this particular issue. And I really do tip my hat to the leadership, to the board, to all of the members of ACTA for their incredible work that they have done, sometimes side of desk, very much unpaid, and in good faith, with the understanding that all of that effort and all of those resources and all of that time wasn't for naught, Mr. Chair, that it was being done in the belief that all of that work would culminate in the in a college of counseling therapy, to ensure that counseling therapists would finally be regulated in the province of Alberta, to ensure that the people accessing those services were guaranteed value and safety and assurance of practice, with a level of oversight and commitment that both brought legitimacy to the practice and also safety to the public. And so my compliments to all of the work of the Association of Counselling Therapy. Just a few months ago, Mr. Chair, there was a change announced from the minister opposite to let us know that this government would choose to take a different tack. That being that the Association of Counselling Therapy would no longer be the precursor to a college of counselling therapy, but rather that moves would be made to bring counselling therapists under the umbrella of the College of Alberta Psychologists. Now, in the last few months, I have also had the opportunity to get to know the leadership at CAP, and similarly, I really do look forward to advocating where appropriate, where it is in fact helpful, to ensure that this work can continue along. Because one thing that has become abundantly clear is that the leadership of both of these very important stakeholder groups share the same objective, and that is to bring the utmost assurance of safety and practice and quality of practice to Albertans, because that time and that kind of oversight and regulation is long overdue. And so I want to make sure that I'm prefacing any further comments with that as a very major condition, that ACTA and CAP are both deeply committed to moving that process forward on behalf of Albertans, on behalf of the individuals that they may one day have the privilege to serve. I've got only the very roughest numbers at the top of my head in terms of the actual membership that we're talking about here, but at latest count, there were more than 4,000 counselling therapists operating in Alberta, again with no degree of oversight or regulation for their practice. These are individuals with a great deal of education, with a great deal of expertise, and it is high time that we treat them with the legitimacy that that sector deserves. ACTA and CAP, and I think everybody on this side of the chambers would all agree that time is upon us. But as I mentioned, all of that work has taken place up until, relatively recently. All of that work had taken place in good faith that government would, in fact, move ahead with this gesture, but they have not. Multiple health ministers gave their green light, gave ACTA their blessing to continue forward with engaging of members. I've already had the opportunity here and the real privilege to submit a petition with thousands of signatures supporting this move. The initial legislation was passed with unanimous consent in 2019, and yet somehow 24 months ago, things changed. And it really did hit a bit of a wall. And I think that that's very unfortunate given the amount of resourcing and the effort that had already been applied. Counseling therapists contributed over $1.2 million toward building the college, as well as thousands of volunteer hours, Mr. Chair. They did this work while government kind of waffled and hemmed and hawed on whether or not this was actually something that they wanted to deal with, which ministry was going to be responsible for doing that. Ultimately, this does fall under the green light of the Health Professions Act, but there is a great deal of work to be done before that. And I think that's something that is incredibly important as we move forward with this new kind of journey that government has now, set ACTA upon when it comes to identifying CAP as the regulatory college. And so Bill 16 proposes to repeal the piece of legislation that can facilitate the creation of a college of counseling therapy. Now, I think, unfortunately, that this is a terribly premature decision because we take that section of what was initially in the Health Statutes Amendment Act of 2020, we take that off the books. And where does it leave us? Where does it leave ACTA? Where does it leave the regulation of counseling therapists? I have already stood up to say where does it certainly leave addictions counselors and child and youth care counselors who are not included in this transition to the College of Psychologists in any way. And so certainly this is going to be a reorientation, and it's one that stakeholders are game for. I really hope that this government is equally keen to advance this in as expedited a way as possible. But when we look at some of the figures that have already been spent by the Association of Counseling Therapists, $1.2 million to get them to where they are now, and we see now that a new transition for ACTA to the College of Psychologists has yet to be resourced by this government. This is not an undertaking to happen side of desk. It requires significant planning, kind of staging, onboarding, some very important questions around self-regulation, around grandparenting. And on that note, I want to just add a couple of other mentions here. So again, this is not a simple thing. There's a great deal of complexity. We have a number of social workers in our caucus who were right there on the front lines when it came to forming a college of social work. They can attest to what a significant endeavor this actually is that requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of money. And so speaking again to the complexity, it has been raised and brought to my attention that it is customary that when a new profession is regulated, the education standards set for those newly entering the field are not to be applied retroactively to the current workforce. It is essential that the public continue to receive and access counseling services with the protection provided under HPA, the Health Professions Act, that future risk is mitigated by upholding the education and training standards set today for those entering the field, and that current risk is reduced by grandparenting counseling therapists working in the field today who have acquired a minimum level of competencies. I don't know exactly where this is going to land with the College of Psychologists, but these are the very meaty and tough questions that are going to have to be kind of sorted through by the individuals responsible for that undertaking. It is not going to be fast, it is not going to be cheap, but what we certainly know is that this process can't be slowed down any further. They have already waited 5 years, Mr. Chair. I don't think Albertans have the patience, nor should they be asked, to wait another 5 years to get some basic assurances that the services that they are paying for are in fact what they are going to get in return. On the self-regulation front, a simple piece here around counseling therapists regulating themselves, so that it's not psychologists who are setting the kind of standards of practice or all of those multiple facets that are required here. In fact, it's counseling therapists who hold equal weight around the decision-making table so that they are making decisions. The best people who understand the sector are those, in fact, in it, and that they need to be the ones who are, in fact, regulating themselves, again, within the umbrella of College of Alberta Psychologists. That is certainly a move that is being done in other jurisdictions where there are fewer colleges, not more, where colleges are in fact regulating a number of different professions. But one can imagine that the logistical, the liability undertakings that college then is volunteering to take on requires some due diligence, requires some regimented planning, and that is certainly going to require some resourcing. So without any further ado, Mr. Chair, I will probably leave it at that. Once again, my compliments to ACTA, my compliments to CAP on what I hope is going to be a very fruitful and expedited endeavour to ensure that counselling therapists in Alberta are in fact regulated and assured the legitimacy and the protections that everybody else working in the care industry ought to have. I look forward to speaking with this government about how we can make sure that addictions counsellors and child and youth care counsellors come next. Thank you very much.
Are there any other members wishing to speak to Bill 16? Ready for the question on Bill number 16, Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act? On the clauses of the bill, are you agreed? Agreed. Any opposed? No. Carried. On the title and preamble, are you agreed? Agreed. Opposed? Carried. Shall the bill be reported? Are you agreed? Agreed. Any opposed? Carried.